Hi guys, I'm just another guy named James, and today I'm going to be talking about the next set of G.I. Joe comics. Now, these issues of G.I. Joe were released in a year, and I'm sure it's a very nice one. Were released in 1990, or 1990 and 1991, and they were all written by Larry Hama, but we have a variety show of artists today. First, we have Jeff Isherwood, who drew the first issue that we're going to be talking about today, which is just this one with Rock and Roll on the cover. And then Mark Bright drew the middle issue and the last issue that we're talking about, and Herb Trimp drew just an issue in the middle of what we're talking about. So, Herb Trimp, if you're trying to figure out where you know that name from, it's probably from G.I. Joe. Herb Trimp drew the first 8 issues of G.I. Joe. He definitely drew the first 8 issues of G.I. Joe. He may have drawn more. And honestly, his artwork on those issues of G.I. Joe was pretty good, but nothing to write home about, honestly. And that's kind of what I think about his artwork in this issue, except it airs more on the side of being not good than on the side of being good. But let's see, overall, there is quite a bit of background going into our story today. A few things that you're really going to want to remember. So I'm just going to briefly recap some of that for you. So some of the biggest ones are going to be that Clutch and Rock and Roll are currently mind controlled by Cobra. If you want an explanation of how and why and who, I do have a video all about that. So it'll be linked in the description, so you can go and watch that if you want. Then let's see, what else do we have? What other background one of the biggest pieces of background information is that the man pretending to be Cobra Commander right now is not Cobra Commander. He is a Crimson Guardsman called Fred 7. So the Crimson Guardsmen of the Fred series are all just a bunch of Cobras that all look exactly the same. So that's what the deal is with Fred 7 versus the other Freds. And then, and as part of Fred 7's attempt to usurp Cobra Commander, he did shoot him. He shot him in the back and buried him. So that's something that's going on. And really, I think that's all. It's all the kind of the big important stuff to get rolling on. But yeah, honestly, this set of 4 issues really does just have a lot going on with it. A lot of it's pretty good. A lot of it's really interesting. Or, more accurately, a lot of it should be really interesting. All these issues are written by Larry Hama, like almost every other issue of the G.I. Joe series. And as you can see, one of these is a double-sized special issue. And honestly, it's not that special. But yeah, I think that's really all the background and lead up and forewarning that I can give to this story. So let's just hop right in. Let's just hop right into the Canadian Mounties who are working with Clutch and Rock and Roll and are pinned down by a suppressive fire from Cobra. Because Clutch, Rock and Roll, and Chuckles are waiting to receive permission to use their to fire weapons on foreign soil. And upon receiving permission, Rock and Roll revs up his new Gatling guns, and he goes marching into the building where the Cobras are holed up. And after the demonstration of the Joe's superior firepower, the Cobras surrender. As the Joes investigate, we see that the warehouse that they are in is full of Terradrome parts, shipping all around the world, which is odd because why would they ship them all to Canada just to ship from Cobra Island to ship them other countries. We then cut to the next day on Cobra Island, where we see that Dr. Mindbender, Darklawn, and Fred 7 are doing a weapons demonstration, and that they're being observed by Billy, the real Cobra Commander's son, Tyrone, some random kid who worked with the Blind Master, Raptor, a really deep cut Cobra agent, Captain Mean, who was around during the Cobra Civil War and shortly after, a very odd character, and the Blind Master, and who was part of Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow's ninja clan. And they've all come to Cobra Island because Raptor is claiming that he knows where the real Cobra Commander is buried. And the Blind Master then, after some deliberation, leaves the crew to do some scouting. Don't ask me how he's going to scout, because I don't really know. We then cut to the reception party for the Cobras, where we see Dr. Mindbender pull Fred into a separate room before revealing himself to be Zartan. Zartan, who has also been impersonating the Blind Master after he killed him in an alleyway, again, see the description, is... but Zartan corners Fred, and he's mad at him for Fred's recent attempts to kill him. And he orders that Fred go back to his service garage in Denver, which is where Fred was when he found Cobra Commander after the collapse of the pit. Again, linked in the description. And just outside this room, we see Raptor come to Dr. Mindbender, trying to convince him to bring back the original Cobra Commander as a clone. And they would be able to do this because Raptor knows where Cobra Commander is buried, and then they would be able to harvest some genetic material from the body and make a clone. We then see Captain Min, Tyrone, and Billy all get captured by Crocmaster in the tunnels beneath Cobra Island. We then cut back to Canada, where we see Clutch, Chuckles, Rock and Roll, and a couple of Mounties enter a log cabin with a bunch of leaders of terrorist states. And inside the cabin, Chuckles finds a hydraulic control panel, and upon pushing the up switch, a terrordrome shoots up through the frozen lake. And Clutch is able to find an invoice that says the terrordromes were shipped from Denver. We then cut to the Colorado foothills at the grave of Cobra Commander, where we see Dr. Mindbender and Raptor and a crew of Vipers are searching for Cobra Commander's body. But they end up getting more than they bargained for, as Cobra Commander has them surrounded by his Crimson Guardsmen. He then explains that he had his Crimson Guardsmen spy on each other, and since Cobra Commander was shot by Fred 7, another guardsman had been observing and dug him up and brought him back to, and kind of helped him, and a crew of Freds helped him nurse him back to health. And from there, Cobra Commander has spent the rest of his time between those events rebuilding his wealth and selling terrordromes to terrorist states, all based out of Denver. Hence the Canadian invoices from Denver. All of this while he was waiting to return to reclaim Cobra Island. And he kind of decides that it's time, and he takes Mindbender and Raptor's return as, hey, this is a good sign, and he takes them all back to Cobra Island. Back on the island, we see Zartan's crew and the Cobras are having a spirited argument in the freighter on the island, when Cobra Commander turns the lights out on them before he opens the hold and throws Raptor and Mindbender into the ship, and then he welds the hole closed. As Cobra Commander flies away to the main part of the island, he sets off a series of charges around the boat that causes it to float into the dormant volcano at the center of the island. Then we cut back. Then Cobra Commander seals the volcano with another series of explosives, leaving the freighter set on both sealed in and of itself, and then sealed into the volcano. We then cut back to the U.S. and we see that Cobra Commander has also had all the Dreadnoks arrested. Then we cut to the Pentagon, where we see the Generals Hawk and Hollingsworth, the generals in charge of the G.I. Joe team. And we see them go to the Jugglers Chamber once again. The Jugglers are a government panel, more or less, that have tried to shut down the G.I. Joe team before. Again, linked in the description, hopefully, if I remember to put in all these links. And they once again try to shut down G.I. Joe over the recent destruction in New York. Down in the freighter, we see Billy, Tyrone, Zartan, Firefly, Voltaire, Raptor, Dr. Mindbender, Crocmaster, Fred, Captain Me, and a couple Vipers. They're all trying to come up with a plan to escape, but it's a plan with a very low chance at success, and one that will only work if they all work around the clock. And we then cut to Broca Beach, the newest town run by Cobra, where Cobra Commander is visiting the Dreadnoks in prison. And Zorana bargains her plot against the Joes, the mind control with Rock and Roll and Clutch, for her freedom. And it's a gambit that works. And she takes Cobra Commander to the place where she has hidden the programming disk that has the subliminal messaging programs for Clutch and Rock and Roll as sleeper agents. We then see that Zorana has been having Clutch and Rock and Roll followed, and that she is monitoring Clutch and Rock and Roll as they testify before the Jugglers about their capture by Cobra. But they don't really remember what they're being questioned about, and as they're being questioned about the Joe's blatant disregard for property damage, Cobra Commander and Zorana hear this, and they plan to set the brainwashed Clutch and Rock and Roll on a rampage in the pit to fully discredit the G.I. Joe team and have them decommissioned. Out in the desert of Utah, there are two teenage girls who are big sci-fi fans, and they're investigating the desert near the pit, wanting to see aliens and whatnot. And they see some of the strange vehicles that the G.I. Joes use, and they believe they're going to be abducted by aliens, before Lady J finds them and brings them down into the pit, so that their parents can be called and picked up, but so that they can also be safe, so they're not out in the desert of Utah. We also see that Zorana is flying overhead in a stealth jet that is invisible to radar, so she knows when to activate Clutch and Rock and Roll's programming. Down in the pit, Lady J tries to call the girls' parents, but the phones aren't working. So her and Flint leave the pit to go to town to use a phone there, leaving the girls with Clutch and Rock and Roll. Out in the desert, Dusty spots something tracking dust clouds through the desert, so he gets Muskrat and Wildcard together, and he gets the Mean Dog rolling to go investigate. Some distance away, we see that the storm that Dusty was seeing was really Zorana riding through the desert on a Cobra stun, and she has a stealth jet run radio jamming to make sure that the Joes can't get help. When Rock and Roll and Clutch go berserk. Rock and Roll and Clutch then take the girls to the armory and show them some of the weapons that they have. And up on the surface, Flint and Lady J find that the owner of the closest part of civilization to them, a gas station, has been tied up by Zorana, and all the phone wires into the town have been cut. So they start heading back to the pit, and at the same time, Dusty catches up to the stun, and they begin a true chase, but Zorana activates the mind control disc on Clutch and Rock and Roll. And it looks like they're about to kill the girls, but we cut back to the surface before you see anything, and we see that the Mean Dog is struggling to take out the jet and the stun at the same time. But Dusty leads the whole firefight right over the mobile command center, and the jet is shot down, but the Mean Dog is also crippled. So it looks like the stun is getting away until Flint and Lady J shoot it down. Flint then takes down the driver, who snitches on the whole plan. So Flint and Lady J go tearing back into the pit to save the girls, but they find them with Clutch and Rock and Roll's knocked out bodies because, as Psych Out explains, no amount of subliminal messaging can force an individual to do something that he would never do. And for today, that's where our story ends. Alright, so that's the story. And honestly, it's It's an alright one. The art is decent. I definitely think Mark Bright is the best artist of the bunch, and I think that really shows. But honestly, this story is just very all the G.I. Joe stories of this era. They just somehow fall flat. They manage to make all of them feel meaningless, even if they aren't. You know what I mean? Like 10 issues ago, you had the setup to this mind control plot with Clutch and Rock and Roll, and they're captured by Cobra, and they're being brainwashed, and all of this is going on, and then nothing. And then then they activate the mind control, and you think it's going to go down, and nothing happens. Literally nothing happens. They just knock themselves out because they're unwilling to kill the kids, which is good, don't get me wrong, but it just reads as kind of lame, you know? It reads like like Larry Hama writing checks that he doesn't want to cash, and then being forced to cash them anyway. It's just such an odd story. Then bringing back Cobra Commander. It's been 40 to 30 issues since Cobra Commander died. In real world time, that would be 3 or 4 years. And they bring him back so lazily. They don't do some elaborate scheme. They don't do anything like that. They just kind of have him pop up and he's back, and that's it. And I think that could have been a really interesting plot point. Having two Cobras running around active, that could have been really cool. They just didn't do anything with it. And you can tell that it very much so feels like a retcon. Whereas it could have been like a really interesting through line through all of these stories, having Fred run the main force of Cobra, and then there's also this ancillary Cobra force that's around and that's doing things, but is kind of staying more in the shadows, but maybe has a couple of run-ins with the G.I. Joe team. That could have been a really interesting concept, but they just don't do anything with it. And it's very odd. And then something else that happens in this story, in this set of issues that I didn't even bother mentioning because it's so irrelevant. Destro and Baroness leave the comic again. And Destro is such an odd character. He's such a weird force throughout the G.I. Joe team. Throughout the G.I. Joe comic. He constantly goes back and forth between whether or not he is a malicious arms dealer, a cunning businessman, a extreme lover of the Baroness. Like, he cannot make up his mind. Like, he just keeps going back and forth on what's most important to him. Like, sometimes he doesn't work for Cobra, and then all of a sudden he will, and then all of a sudden, now all of a sudden he's stopped. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. And all of these G.I. Joe stories from this era, from this editorial era by, I forget who edits. Sorry, I gotta check the editors. Dang, that's not the one to check. And the editorial mandates of this, the editorial on this comic is Bobby Chase, and all of the G.I. Joe comics in the Bobby Chase era have had endings that just fall flat. And it's not as if it's, like once in a blue moon you have a story that just falls flat or kind of fizzles out. It's been all of them. The Cobra Civil War massively fizzled out. The Return of Destro fizzled. You've had a couple good one-off issues in there, but for the most part every story has fizzled. Now the big mind control, like what if Cobra had control of some of the Joes? Now that has fizzled, and it fizzled out so hard. Like there was just no reason for it to fizzle that badly. The one thing that I do credit this story with is I think that killing off all the ancillary Cobra characters was a really good move, you know. Killing off, you know, or at least writing them out of the comic for a while. You know, characters like Firefly and Zartan and Dr. Mindbender and Fred and Captain Min, Captain Raptor, Billy. Like, all these characters that haven't really served a purpose in the comic for a while. Kind of getting them out of there, clearing house. To me, it works. Especially, I wish they'd thrown more of the Dreadnoks in there. Like, almost all of them. I hate the Dreadnoks. If you watch a lot of my G.I. Joe videos, you could probably tell that I don't like the Dreadnoks very much. But honestly, overall, this story kind of just has a lot of elements that do fall flat. The return of Cobra Commander doesn't feel grand and like a big resolution to some ongoing story. It feels like a last minute retcon, because it is. I wish I can't remember if I already said this or not, but I think it would have been really great if we had gotten throughout the last 50 issues hints and, you know, clues, and if we had seen some of the, you know, the Crimson Guards, some of the different factions of Cobra, like the Crimson Guardsmen and the standard Cobra troopers work for Cobra Commander, and then have the Vipers and the Bats working for Fred and Dr. Mindbender, and then have issues where they fight the Crimson Guardsmen and the troopers, and we, the reader, know that that's somehow, and give us, the reader, a clue that that's somehow separate from the main force of Cobra on Cobra Island with the Vipers and the Bats and all that. I think that would have been really cool and really interesting. But it's all right. It's all right. Overall, the G.I. Joe comic is just kind of, by issue 100, it's kind of gone to the point where it's kind of just spinning its wheels. And looking back on the first 100 issues of G.I. Joe, a lot of it, like the first 100, a lot of it's pretty good. The first 53 issues are with only a few exceptions, really good. And then all of a sudden, then it gets like progressively, it's on a progressive decline. And we're kind of a slight increase, you know, think about it like a stock flow. And we're about to see some exponential decline in the quality of the G.I. Joe comic, unfortunately. Spoilers for what's coming up ahead. But yeah, overall, I do just think it's an interesting comic. I think this specific story has its share of problems, and honestly, the biggest problem with it is, you know, or one of the hard things about the comic at this time, it has so many subplots that you just can't keep it straight. There's the Destro and Baroness subplot. There's Aftermath from the Snake Eyes trilogy going on. There's rock and roll. There's rock and roll in the mind control. There's the return of Cobra Commander. And then there's what I'm gonna talk about next G.I. Joe video. Spoilers again. There's the Cobra starting its takeover over this random small town in the U.S. And it's just such a, you know, there's so much going on, but so little happening. It's very odd. It's a very odd comic at this time. And honestly, like, even though I think the art is some of the best it's ever been, with Mark Bright taking the helm, the comic itself is just, it just feels stale at this point. But honestly, it's still not too bad. It's not actively insulting to the senses like it could sometimes be. And that's only due to the art. The writing is very pedantic, you know. I don't know. That's really all I got. That's really all I have to say on these issues of G.I. Joe. So I think we'll cut it there. And yeah, I'm just another guy named James, and I'll see y'all next time. Goodbye.